I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. So for today's video, this will be something new on my channel. Well, not a series of videos, but I haven't done this video yet on my YouTube channel. So today's video will be about the top 10 fantasy authors when it comes to writing combat scenes. So last week, I actually did a 25,000 sub celebration video, a live stream video, and in that live stream I got plenty of questions asking me who do I think is the best fantasy authors when it comes to writing battle scenes. I got plenty of questions on that, and also action-packed fantasy series. But today's video is not about action-packed fantasy series. It is about, I think, the best fantasy authors when it comes to writing combat scenes. I actually wanted to post this video last week, but as it turns out, I had plenty of difficulties in releasing this video. The main one actually coming up with the ranking for this one. I cannot decide out of these top 10 which one is my utmost favorite and also which one is the least. I simply cannot decide. So I want to let you know first that in today's video, these are not ranked. These are not ranked by my preference. I think every author here has their own strengths in their battle scenes that work really well to the narrative they crafted in their series. This video will not ever be made if I had waited for me to feel settled with my ranking for preference. So yeah, today's video is the top 10. That's it. Instead, I will rank this video and I will go through them in order based on how much fantastical aspect is involved in the combat scenes, in the battle scenes, whether it's low or heavy on the magic usage, and whether it involves many fantastical creatures or not. So yeah, let's get started, and I will just start this list with Joe Abercrombie, the author behind The First Law World and also the Shattered Sea trilogy. Now, I haven't read Shattered Sea trilogy yet, but I think I have mentioned many times that The First Law World is my favorite grim dark fantasy series, and Joe Abercrombie is known for many things. His characters, his witty dialogues, his memorable phrases, especially characters really. His characterizations in grim dark fantasy is absolutely impeccable, in my opinion anyway. But not only these things, he's also very well known for his battle scenes, and I think these praises is very much well deserved. There is a certain quality to Joe Abercrombie's writing that really feels vivid and cinematic to me. And one of my favorite things about his battle scenes is something that's kinda rarely replicated in other fantasy books. I personally haven't seen many instances where this actually happened. So I'm talking about something that he started implementing in his battle scenes since Last Argument of Kings, the third book in the First Law trilogy, and then he expanded upon this heavily in the Heroes and also the Age of Madness trilogy. So I am talking about the seamless shift of POV characters. So for example, in the Heroes, without spoilers, there are these battle scenes where we see the story from a perspective of a normal soldiers, someone that we didn't know. We haven't seen these POV characters appearing in any of the previous books. We get to really see the explicit terror of war from these characters, and then after this character get killed, the POV immediately shifts to the killer. And this goes on and on and on. I think it is just so brilliant. It shows just how destructive war can be. And I'm just talking about the Heroes. He's implemented this in Lost Argument of Kings as well, and in the chapter titles Little People in the Age of Madness. It's so good. It is so good. I think Joe Abercrombie is one of the best when it comes to writing close quarter combat scenes that doesn't involve a fantastical aspect. Magic do exist in his books, but they are rarely used in battle scenes. Very rarely used. Most of the battle scenes in the First Law World, they involve sword fights, axes, close quarter combats, and Joe Abercrombie is so excellent at this. And moving on to the next on the list, I have to choose Fonda Lee for what she did in the Green Bone Saga. I know that it is quite often that when we are talking about the Green Bone Saga, people like to say that her action scenes are brilliant, they are engaging and impactful, and that's pretty true. But I think I need to mention that it's all possible because of Fonda Lee's absolutely incredible characterizations. The Green Bone Saga doesn't involve any fantastical creatures. Every conflict in the Green Bone Saga involves humans, and it is the best fantasy trilogy that I have ever read. It is just absolutely amazing. And one of the things that Fonda Lee definitely excels is, well, definitely the combat scenes. Most of the battles in the trilogy are close quarter combat, but whether it's duels or big battle scenes, I think all of them were just magnificent, and none of these battles ever felt like they're wasted. Fonda Lee doesn't waste anything on the Greenbone Saga trilogy. Every dialogues, every battles, and everything, really, everything matters. Fonda Lee definitely make the action scenes count. The Greenbone Saga do utilize magic to the battle scenes, specifically jade channeling, that it's used to amplify physical or mental prowess of the users. Senses and physical capabilities are enhanced, and there are after effects of using too many jade in this trilogy. I think it is so brilliant how Fonda Lee implemented the jade magic to her trilogy. The shifting of tension in the atmosphere can always be felt. The dialogues can be super intense, sometimes even more intense than the battle scenes. And again, as I said, every battle scenes in this trilogy matters. They always felt personal, intimate, and filled with significant results. And then the next on the list is the only author with only one book that I've read from her, and it is M.L. Wang with The Sword of Kaigen. I mean, what else do I need to say about this? This is my favorite self-published fantasy book. It is my favorite standalone book. And yeah, it is a masterpiece of epic fantasy in my opinion. And similar to the praises I gave the Greenbone Saga, I think I can almost replicate my praises in a different way and give them to The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. And yes, the battle scenes in this one do involve more magic compared to the Greenbone Saga. There are ice dragons magic, ice magic, fire magic. But what I love most about the battle scenes in The Sword of Kaigen is that they all have immense impacts, immense emotional impacts. I think those who have read The Sword of Kaigen will know what I'm talking about. Whether it's duels or the big battle scenes. I mean, thinking about it, there are only two big action scenes in The Sword of Kaigen, and they are some of the best that I've ever read. They are so good. So good. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but just like the Greenbone Saga, the First Law World, and also here in The Sword of Kaigen, these three series by these authors have some of the best and the most memorable duel scenes I've ever read. And then the next on the list, I will have to choose Brian Staveley with World of the Unhewn Throne, that started with Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, and then Skullsworn, a standalone prequel novel to the first trilogy, and finally the first book in Ashes of the Unhewn Throne. So yeah, the World of the Unhewn Throne. I think this one counts as military fantasy, and although I usually do not click too often with military fantasy, not really sure why my experience dictate this, but it is what it is. But when it comes to Brian Staveley's books, I've started to become a fan of his books ever since I read Skullsworn. Now, do not get me wrong, I do enjoy the first trilogy, but I did have plenty of issues with them. But I cannot deny that his battle scenes, all of them were pretty damn good, especially starting from Providence of Fire. And then in The Last Mortal Bond, the battle scenes at the end of the book actually felt like it's written by Brandon Sanderson. It is that good. And then of course there is Skullsworn and The Empire's Ruin. The Empire's Ruin is my favorite book by Brian Staveley, and this one has the best action scenes in the entire series so far. I cannot go into too much detail, but with Brian Staveley's beautiful writing, these battle scenes felt so impactful to me. There were actually plenty of scenes in The Empire's Ruin that reminded me of reading The Way of Kings for the first time. This is not a praise I give lightly, but it's true. That's how I feel about it, and I cannot deny that Ketral, the giant birds used by the Ketral in this series, is just so awesome. And moving on to the fifth author on this list, I will have to choose Ken Liu. And this might come as a surprise to many of you, especially if you haven't read the Dandelion Dynasty. I've read The Paper Menagerie and also The Hidden Girl, the collection of short stories. These two are the collection of short stories by Ken Liu before I actually read the Dandelion Dynasty. And if I haven't read the Dandelion Dynasty, I wouldn't have counted Ken Liu as a combat scenes writer. But just from reading The Grace of Kings, and then after reading The Wall of Storms and Speaking Bones, that's the first, the second, and also the fourth book in the Dandelion Dynasty, I really have to say that Ken Liu is one of the best combat scenes writer. And do not get me wrong, even though I'm mentioning Ken Liu as the fifth ranking when it comes to the number of fantastical aspects included in his books in the Dandelion Dynasty, but there are very few magic involved. Instead, Ken Liu included inventions and technologies into the battles and also the world building, and the result, I must say, I cannot praise it highly enough. They are amazing, and the stakes, no one is safe in Ken Liu's books. I think you will know just from reading The Grace of Kings that that's really the case, and it will feel even more the more you progress through the entire series. The Battle of Zatin Gulf and the last two battles in the Speaking Bones, these are some of the most magnificent battle scenes and war scenes I've ever read in fantasy. And when you add Ken Liu's absolutely beautiful writing, they turn into something truly unforgettable. It is so merciless and mind-blowing. Ken Liu is absolutely amazing. We still have 5 more favorite authors when it comes to writing battle scenes, and the next one I'm going to mention is Nicholas Eames. Now, Nicholas has only 2 books out in the Banned trilogy so far. The Kings of the Wild and also Bloody Rose. Kings of the Wild was published in 2017 and Bloody Rose came out in 2018. So yeah, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years since Bloody Rose, and I am patiently waiting for the 3rd and final book of the Banned trilogy. But I think many of us actually, when we talk about the Banned trilogy, we always talk about the humor and how fun and engaging it is to read the trilogy, especially when we are talking about Kings of the Wild. And this is not a wrong analysis. It is true. But once we entered Bloody Rose, I think this is when the trilogy started to turn into something more serious rather than humorous, and it is the battle scenes here, especially the final battle in the Bloody Rose. It is epic, huge in scope, emotional, and also I must say that there's one thing that I really love about Nicholas Eames' books is how he implemented music reference and most importantly, Final Fantasy and video game reference into his world building and dialogues. I think this is absolutely brilliant. I am a fan of Final Fantasy, and Nicholas Eames is also a huge fan of Final Fantasy, and I can tell so many references included in Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose. I mean, in Bloody Rose, there is also a reference to the shadow of Colossus in the final battle. This is so brilliant, and beyond the Easter eggs, I think the Banned trilogy is just amazing, and Nicholas Eames, even though only 2 books are out in the series, the Banned is still one of my favorite ongoing series, and the battles are unforgettable too, in my opinion. And of course, moving on to the next one, this list will not be completed without me mentioning John Gwynne, the author behind The Faithful and the Fallen, of Blood and Bone trilogy, which is the Banished Land saga, the 7 books in the Banished Land saga, and lastly, the Blood Sworn saga. I think some of you might be surprised with me placing John Gwynne as the 4th when it comes to the ranking for fantastical aspect involved in the battles. But after thinking about it, even though the majority of the battle scenes in John Gwynne's books involve close-quarter combats with no magic involved, there are just so many fantastical aspects to the Banished Land saga and also the Bloodsworn saga, especially the Bloodsworn saga. In the Banished Land saga, we have Kadoshim, demons. Let's just say they are demons. And then we have Ben Elim, the angels. And then there are giants, a giant wolf, which is a wolfen, giants riding bear, magical artifacts. And yeah, I think after thinking about it, I think the fantastical aspect is actually pretty huge in The Faithful and the Fallen of Blood and Bone trilogy, and of course, as I said, Bloodsworn saga, which involve even more magic usage compared to the Banished Land saga. But other than the fantastical aspect here, I must say that John Gwynne has always been one of the best combat scenes writer. He is a reenactor in his real life, and the quality of his experience is reflected in his narrative when it comes to writing battle scenes. Amazing. I have always praised his characterizations and also action sequences, and I will always continue to praise that. I'm looking forward to reading the 3rd and final book in the Bloodsworn saga, and John Gwynne is one of my favorite authors, not only when it comes to writing battle scenes, but of all time. And moving on to the next author on this list, and this is the 2nd self-published fantasy authors appearing on this list, and it is Ryan Cahill for the Bound and the Broken series. So to put it simply, the fantastical aspect to Ryan Cahill's books is huge. Almost all the battle scenes in the Bound and the Broken involve magic and fantastical aspect. There are dragons, there are giants, magical knights, soul blades, druids, and many more. This is definitely a classic epic fantasy with a lot of high fantasy elements involved in the battle scenes and also world building. So I think the best way to capture Ryan Cahill's writing when it comes to combat scenes, think about it this way. Imagine John Gwynne, but more magics and high fantasy aspect involved in the battles. That's really what you will get with Ryan Cahill's books in the Bound and the Broken series. I've read many books by many authors, and I think Ryan Cahill is the closest one in terms of writing. He is the one that feels the closest to John Gwynne, and I know that John Gwynne is actually one of his main inspirations in writing. So if you love John Gwynne's battle sequences and you want them to be even more fantastical, well, choose Ryan Cahill's books. You will know what I'm talking about when you enter the second book of Darkness and Light. You will understand what I'm talking about. So we only have 2 authors left on this list, and these two authors and their series have the highest of high fantasy elements or fantastical elements included in their battles. And I'm talking about, first, Steven Erikson with Malazan Book of the Fallen, or the entire Malazan series. The epic scope of the series is practically unparalleled in fantasy, and when it comes to battle scenes or war scenes, it is hard to find something more epic than Malazan Book of the Fallen. It is hard. We have plenty of chapters. In the entire 10-book series, we have plenty of chapters exceeding 100 pages long, and the sieges in this entire series, all of them were masterfully done. If you have read the series up to Memories of Vice, or maybe even a Death House Gates, I think you will understand what I'm talking about. But from my experience, I think it's better to say that try to read the series up to Memories of Vice, and if the series still not clicking with you, I think the series might not be for you, and that's okay. If you've read the series up to Memories of Vice and you love what you're reading, then you will know what kind of battle scenes and epic battle scenes I'm talking about here, especially if you manage to actually reach the 6th book in the series, The Bone Hunters, and of course the Crippled God and Told the Hounds. You know what? Every book in Malazan, and they involve many fantastical aspects, whether it's magic, magical swords, creatures, all of them matters. They are included in my ranking here, and yes, Steven Erikson is one of the best epic fantasy writers when it comes to writing epic battle scenes. And of course, the last one will have to be Brandon Sanderson. This guy is an embodiment of magic. I mean, when people speak about Brandon Sanderson, I think we almost will always think about magic system and world building, especially magic system. We just kind of think of Brandon Sanderson as creator of Heart Magic System or something, even though he's not, but he's just so memorable for it. And almost all the battles, almost all the actions in the entire Cosmere universe involve magic. The Stormlight Archive alone would already earn Brandon Sanderson high on this list, just the Stormlight Archive. And when we count his other books in the Cosmere as well, he is guaranteed to appear on this list. I think one of my favorite things about Brandon Sanderson's actions is that I can experience epic battle scenes in the most accessible way. I never felt burdened or heavy with reading his actions. I think they are utterly easily imagined in my mind. It's like watching movies in my mind when I'm reading Brandon Sanderson's books, whether it's on the actions or on the world building and many other aspects. But for today's video, we are just talking about battle scenes, and yeah, I think he's really one of the best action scenes writer, and I don't think we actually talk about this often enough compared to his world building and characterizations, and also writing, whether you like it or not. And yeah, I do honestly think that he has crafted some of the finest epic fantasy battle scenes, and this is coming from me who haven't even read what he wrote in the Wheel of Time, the last 3 books in the Wheel of Time. And so I haven't read The Last Battle yet, the 200 pages long chapter of The Last Battle in A Memory of Light. I haven't read that one yet, and I can already safely say in including Brandon Sanderson in my list of favorite authors when it comes to writing combat scenes in epic fantasy. And if I were to rank this, like I said at the beginning of this video, if I were to rank this list based on the fantastical aspect involved in the battle scenes, I think Steven Erikson and also Brandon Sanderson are at the top. They involve just so much high fantasy aspect, and if you do not like reading high fantasy, you do not like reading high fantasy battles, I think there's a low chance of you liking their books. That's my opinion anyway. So yeah, that's it. That's my top 10 fantasy authors when it comes to writing battle scenes. And believe me, this list is not easy to make. I wish I can include more authors, but I also want to try to compress this list into top 10 lists. And lastly, before I end this video, I want to actually say that these battle scenes, although all of them are pretty damn good and epic, it needs to be mentioned that they doesn't matter if I don't care about the characters. If I don't care about the characters or the characterizations, I don't feel invested in their journey and story, these battles, they will just become something flashy in my mind, but devoid of impact. And that is not the case with these 10 authors. I think their characterizations are incredibly well done, and in return, their battle scenes turn into something tense and pulse-pounding to me. Something epic and unforgettable, epic in their own way. But that's it for today's video. Do let me know what you think about my top 10 list, and do tell me what are some of your favorite authors, favorite fantasy authors when it comes to writing battle scenes in fantasy. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.